Picture the scene. It's the 9th of March 2005. It's Gran Turismo 4 release day. The legacy that this game leaves is and always will be eternal. A game that captured the hearts of all of us who share the passion for car culture and motor racing. The gameplay, the visuals, the cars, the tracks, even the soundtrack, everything just clicked in this game. Sure, it wasn't perfect, no game is ever perfect, but you don't need to make a perfect game to make an enjoyable one which has the potential to mark a chapter in your life. No wonder we call GT4 not only one of the best ever games from the Gran Turismo franchise, but in the entire car racing and motorsport genres. However, little did we know that despite technology advancements over time and the ever-growing popularity of this genre, this would be the peak of the car racing video game niche. And following the PS2 era, car racing games would experience a notable downfall in quality and player experience, particularly within the Gran Turismo series. Gran Turismo 5. It's safe to say that the developers, Polyphony Digital, bit off far more than they could chew. Over 2 years of delays just to leave us with a lackluster single-player mode with its complex level-up system, a plethora of reused PS2 car models and unused content, such as the extensive list of tracks that were cut from development before being found hidden in the in-game files, inconsistent game performance with frequent FPS drops and screen tearing, and the only real highlights being the extra events offered in updates across the game's lifecycle, some of which being absolute bangers, while others swaying the community's opinion a little bit. Gran Turismo 6. My opinion of this game is somewhat biased, as this is the Gran Turismo game I grew up with the most. I personally liked the system of using the licenses to represent the different difficulties of the single-player races. However, the general public opinion was that, for the second game running, not enough effort had been put into it despite the abundance of event variety. And to be honest, I can see where they're coming from. Terrible cat and mouse AI, barely any wet weather races, no mechanical damage, a lack of endurance races, a star system which was either better or worse than GT5's level system, but either way not one that players wanted. You can see where this is going. Once again, the special events were either absolute bangers or just a bit mid. Overall, the game seemed like after trying to over-deliver for GT5, GT6 was a new low in the series for not trying hard enough. Not to mention, not even bothering to release the game on the already brand new hardware, the PS4. But let's be honest, who really wants to see standard cars in a game 2 consoles later than its original? And then Gran Turismo Sport, a sim racing title with a primary focus on motorsport and online multiplayer. But then why did they market the game as the latest installment in the traditional series? Instead of building the game in the style of, say, GT Concept, which was branded as simply a spin-off, GT Sport had no intention of shouting about how it deviated from the norm, including not building any sort of single-player. Polyphony then rushed to release a single-player mode and then to release vast update content to quickly satisfy traditional fans, which continued to form the vast majority of the player base. Polyphony's CEO and Gran Turismo series producer Kazunori Yamauchi stated that the backlash after GT Sport's release, given it was an experimental game, somewhat amazed him. But therefore, it should have been an indication to never deviate from the norm when it comes to satisfying your loyal fanbase. Kaz did not take this advice on board. Before we start on Gran Turismo 7, I want to bring your attention back to the interview where Kaz spoke about GT Sport. He also spoke about the opinions of fans and his vision for GT7. And I want to clear this up immediately, as this will be particularly important later in the video. Car enthusiasts, particularly those who are Gran Turismo players, still drive and prefer sports cars, and car enthusiasts, particularly those who are Gran Turismo players, do not drive and do not prefer SUVs, with the exception of Kaz. Are we all on the same page? Yes? Great. Let's keep that in mind and continue. Gran Turismo 7 released on the 4th of March 2022. After a 1-year delay following the COVID-19 pandemic, players were looking forward to what was expected to be the first true installment to the main series in 8 years, or 9 if you ignore the months. It's important to note that unlike GT5, where delays were instilled because the game wasn't near completed because their ambition was too high, GT7 was delayed due to a natural phenomenon completely out of Polyphony's control. We weren't expecting a near-perfect game like we were 12 years prior, but something that truly did give us a nod back to the past. At first, from the marketing, it looked like GT7 had got it just right.
This is ultimately the classic GT campaign mode.
Classic GT campaign. Oh yes! Can't wait to dominate the professional league.
Gran Turismo 7 will represent the pinnacle of the GT journey.
Haha! Pinnacle of the GT journey!
If you look at it on a global scale, air containing moisture from the oceans flows into the continents. That air is warmed by the Earth's surface, heated by the sun, which produces ascending air currents. The air containing moisture will continue to rise in altitude due to this current, and once at a certain altitude and temperature, creates the clouds you see in the sky.
I don't particularly remember asking. So with GT7 on course to give us a great throwback to the past games, with the hopeful return of an enjoyable single-player and multiplayer experience, carefully picked and designed cars and tracks, and a wealth of new features to boot, surely we were in for a real treat. Oh, you know what's coming. You know what's coming. Why have I even included this in my script? It's like, so with GT7 on course to give us a great throwback to the past games, surely we were in for a real treat. Like, I don't need to build up the suspense, because you already know what I'm about to... I'm going to plow through. Surely we were in for a real treat. Well, I went to pick up my pre-order copy of GT7 on the 5th of March, and although I was almost immediately confused about being forced to begin the music rally, I was hyped up again by the intro, which, while it was unskippable, did give me a real feeling of what it would feel like to be racing in the game. What gave me a real feeling of the game being pointlessly restrictive, though, was the fact that for the second numbered game in a row, you were forced to buy a starter car you had little to no interest in. But unlike GT6, despite the car you just bought now being your first car of choice over the other two, you were then going to be forced to unlock the other two over the space of the next 6 minutes, before being introduced to the GT7 Try Not to Fall Asleep and or Dive Boredom challenge. Already within the first 10 minutes of post-intro gameplay, you've been chucked into Kaz's interpretation of the classic GT campaign, which couldn't be any further from the reality. And this would set the tone for hours of gameplay to come. It's hard to know whether GT6 or 7 is the worst offender when it comes to starter cars. While GT6 did force you to buy the Honda Fit RS, the ability to buy any car in the game was immediately unlocked, and you were still given so many credits that you would have been able to afford another car with just above the Honda Fit's number of performance points, which you could buy and use in the novice event. Whether or not this was a deliberate move from Polyphony or not is unclear, but the point is at least you were offered a lifeline. GT7 on the other hand provides no sort of loophole. I had Honda Fit's PTSD, and although now looking back I wish I picked the Mazda Demio, I selected the Toyota Aqua, merely because it had the biggest performance point rating, only to have to win 2 races to earn the other 2 cars in the first menu book and listen to everyone's favourite American Italian waffle about cars I don't care about. Utter waste of time. Speaking of the menu books, where do we start here? The linear restrictive progression, the focus on car collecting for the sake of car collecting, the final cutscene before you've even encountered at least half the entire car list or any of what would be potentially stronger opponents. From making you lose brain cells with this fundamentally unnecessary desire to tell you about the history of every car brand and model, to the absolute cinema. While the history of cars to some may be interesting to sit back through and learn about, forcing players to sit through it contrasts to older Gran Turismo games where you could enjoy race after race consistently without interruption and enjoy the thing players have come to do, which isn't to waste time in a cafe where I can't even order a coffee, it's to go racing in various models of road and race cars. As such, Polyphony deviates from the niche they themselves created. I speak for not just car racing gamers, but all gamers in existence when I say the priority for any game should be to spend less time navigating the menus and features on the side in a game mode or single player experience, and spend more time enjoying the main gameplay. This is something games like EAFC, or to stay on the sim racing side, F125 do very well in their career modes, by offering in-depth features such as the evolutions of contract negotiating or upgrading your car, but still simply allowing you to progress time and get on to the next match or race weekend. This could have been implemented within the menu books, but no. In the early game with the shorter races, you could spend far more time exiting a race, heading to the cafe, failing the GT7 try not to fall asleep and or dive boredom challenge, being offered a menu book for a basic activity that a 2-year-old could do, leaving the cafe, completing the activity, returning to the cafe, finding out that doing said activity somehow warrants gifting you a track, being given the next menu book for the next set of cars to pointlessly earn, and navigating back to the world circuits to find the event, then the time you actually spend racing. The idea of menu books wasn't the fundamental issue, it was the way in which Polyphony went about structuring them, by prioritising car collection, culture and history over making connections with cars you choose to buy and building your own wealth of knowledge and memories. One ideal scenario to adapt the single player to both new players and long-time GT fans that I heard about before but found its way back to me when I did further research for this video would be to have a GT3 or GT4 style main campaign, with those events unlocking in the same way they did back then, and the menu books on the side for anyone who is interested in car collection and Luca's bedtime stories. Much more convenient than shoving culture and history in your face every 5 minutes. And who thought it was a good idea to end the campaign on a Group 3 championship, which I comfortably beat in a Group 4, before even mentioning the abundance of Group 2 and Group 1 cars, or other manufacturers, car models, etc. The post-credits game, with the bonus and extra menus added in updates, is not only so meaningless as we've been wished goodbye already, but also even more pointless than the main menu books, given the aim is now to waste all your credits on cars you might now never race, and be given not a single decent reward for it. In summary, Polyphony made a single player which wasn't the pinnacle of the GT journey, but instead the pinnacle of boredom, dissatisfaction and devastation, pushing us through the worst single player campaign ever made in the series' history and spitting us out on the other end as if we were never supposed to play for enjoyment in the first place. Let's quickfire through some other smaller cons of GT7 that are worth noting. Track redesigns. After the new original tracks in GT Sport didn't attract much acclaim, GT7 returned to the days of old by bringing back many updated tracks from previous games and adding even more of them over time. Except they didn't return to the days of old because the track layouts were butchered by being made excessively different or stretched out. Some were even revolutionised, but the better way to put it is completely ruined. The only reason? Providing more overtaking opportunities for sport mode. While it may be the most popular mode for social media content, to say it's not even touched by the majority of the player base is an understatement. The only returning track from PS1, 2 and 3 era games that was left untouched was High Speed Ring. So maybe its track size was deemed satisfactory for sport mode, but look how often that gets used in sport mode anyway. It's just ridiculous. The AI. Remember the PS3 era cat and mouse AI I touched on briefly while pointing out what GT5 and 6 did wrong? Well, that also returns in GT7, and it's worse than ever. Who thought it was a good idea to carry over the catch-up system and adjust AI pace entirely on the position of the player relative to the leader? It punishes you if you take a car they suggest driving by making you play through half a whole race without seeing a speck of life, and if you try to make it a challenge by taking a car significantly below a performance point suggestion or limit, it punishes you with the catch-up system taking effect and the AI speeding up to an unreachable pace. Not to mention, Polyphony wants to hide this from us by making AI lap times unavailable in replays in update 1.26. And don't get me started on the inconsistency. In the past, I thought I had finally worked out the meta for making an enjoyable last first challenge. Take a car 40 to 50 performance points below a suggested figure and 80 to 100 performance points below a performance point cap. However, anyone watching my streams recently will know I've been trying the weekly challenges every Tuesday. Some races are just about beatable in a car 100 points below a race's limit, but others bully you by having you stabilise around 15 seconds behind the leader in the same scenario. I had to beat the World Touring Car 600 in a GTR R35, around only 15 points below the limit. And for the record, I'm an A and S rated driver, playing on professional AI difficulty. While I'm no World Series driver, I'd like to think I'm no slouch. Sprinkle in the leader starting a sector down the road and scripted strategies in weather, tyre and fuel affected races, and it's an embarrassment. GT Soffi can't come soon enough. Vision Gran Turismo. Players want to see real cars in the game. They want to see their favourite cars, coupled with various ways to customise them and make them their own, because in Gran Turismo, that's how you make an attachment to the cars you use. This just isn't it. Many overpriced cars, prohibited upgrades and customization, unattractive designs, no single player integration at launch, refusal to put any effort into its integration post-launch, and moronic characteristics which can't be put to any good use. The motivation behind this? It's either money or it's Kaz. Does Gran Turismo use the licenses they paid for to propose VGT ideas to the manufacturers and sometimes just straight up brands in markets which are irrelevant to the automotive industry? Or do these businesses see value in VGTs and voluntarily pay Polyphony to get their futuristic visions to appear in the game? According to Kaz, it's a mix of both, claiming he approached these brands asking them to make their own design for the game. Either way, their futuristic visions are blatantly unreflective, with some cars seemingly labelled with a target year in the aim of predicting what supercars or hypercars will look like by then, and not only missing the bullseye, but the entire dartboard. How can Kaz look at this and fully believe that this is enhancing the player experience? The program needs to be terminated immediately. Besides, the program was introduced in GT6 as a 15th anniversary project, and it's been 12 years since then. The program has passed its expiry date. Move on. The events. No, let's not add events for the cars in the game that have currently been rendered completely useless. Instead, let's add the American Sunday Cup 600. No, I'm not making this up, I'll say it again. American Sunday Cup 600. Oh good, let's take on the Sunday Cup in the Dodge Viper. You know how Polyphony's creativity for sport mode is so bad that Group 3 or Group 4 at Largo Maggiore seems to turn up every 2 weeks? Honestly, I think this tops that. I stand with most YouTubers who've spoken about this already when I say I genuinely feel sorry for the employees who work on certain car and track design and see all their hard work go to waste because either the cars don't line up with pointlessly restrictive event parameters or Polyphony just refuses to put any events at that track. Even after the Grand Valley Highway 1 disaster, perhaps it would have been a nice idea to reintroduce the Grand Valley 300km to help us acclimatise to the redesign. Sure, there are some tracks that wouldn't really work in the late game as the speed of the cars you and the AI drive starts to increase and the tracks you drive on become more complex. But surely you would then decide to prioritise those easy tracks in the early hours of the playthrough, rather than giving them one sole event each and giving players no reason to ever return to that track for a race. Some tracks even have all their races on a certain layout, completely disregarding the other ones. What's even the point of having the others in the game then? Not putting all the cars in the game to good use, refusing to acknowledge the wealth of tracks and layouts they have in their own game, and refusing to create anything interesting and appealing to the player base. Nothing more needs to be said here. Now that we've fired through the shorter complaints, let's move on to the update content, and there's only one place we can start here. Remember this interview? Well, this is where it's relevant. In the past, car enthusiasts drove sports cars, but they still do. Nowadays, car enthusiasts often drive SUVs. No, they don't. I think we have to cover such cars. No, you don't. You are building a racing game aimed at cars the fanbase is interested in. This is not the Algeria City Simulator, not the boring family car simulator, not the piece rate pay delivery man simulator. No, this is Gran Turismo, a game featuring various low-end cars, sports cars, supercars and race cars that we want to drive. We despise the thought of driving vans or trucks or SUVs because, as I said before, car enthusiasts, particularly those who are Gran Turismo players, still drive and prefer sports cars, and car enthusiasts, particularly those who are Gran Turismo players, do not drive and do not prefer SUVs. At the time of recording, I can safely say I have actively been waiting over a calendar year to not say at least one car in an update is bad. If it really does take so long now to accurately create and design vehicles, do not invest your money and resources into non-existent cars, VGTs, SUVs, or things that are not even considered cars. Put your effort into not just any old car, but the cars that we want to see in the game. And if those are cars from the past, so be it, because that's what the fans want. Sure, we have had SUVs and trucks represented in older games, but those were at an extremely small capacity, and Gran Turismo 7's car list length is a far cry from the number of cars in those older games. In a game where you have close to or over 1,000 cars and a significantly shorter time period to build cars, you can probably afford the odd SUV. Chances are you'll play through the entire game and never even notice those cars are there. For Gran Turismo 7, a game with a car list half the size of those in older games, and for which developers require 9 months to build a single car, you cannot afford to add terrible SUVs, because by doing so, the percentage of bad cars in the car list increases and enrages the community far more. It becomes more important for the time, money and resources to be spent on what actually pleases the player base. Kaz's philosophy, his belief that enthusiasts drive SUVs, and his intention to look to and represent the future of car culture in general, instead of representing the outlook of the actual car enthusiast world, doesn't seem to be changing anytime soon. So what is he still doing making Gran Turismo games if he doesn't know what cars work in such games? The cars are not even the only issue. First of all, at the time of recording, it's also coming up to a year since a new track was introduced, and even back then, it was a returning track from the PS3 era which was butchered for the sake of sport mode, the mode the majority of the player base is not interested in. You've been flooded with criticism following the game's release for taking fun away from players and unjustifiably making incomprehensible layout changes to fan-favourite tracks, removing the key aspects of what made them so popular. What do you do with that criticism? Pretend no one said anything and just keep going as normal. It's extremely insulting. In Kaz's message to the community following extreme backlash upon release, he asked us to wait and see how GT7 develops over time. It's hard to tell if the game is better or worse, but I'm surely neither the first nor last person to say it's still a very poor representation of a Gran Turismo game. You might have noticed I still haven't exactly stated who's to blame yet, but given the title and thumbnail of this video, you wouldn't be watching this if you didn't know who I'm going to point the finger to. And I must have made it obvious from previous information by now. Kaz is Polyphony Digital's CEO and the producer of the Gran Turismo franchise, as I mentioned near the start of this video. Therefore, not only does he invest his money into the Gran Turismo game to fund its development and then make his money from Gran Turismo sales, kind of like the producers of a TV series or film, but all decisions, ideas and directions are verified by him or proposed by him. However, he wants to build a game which represents the entire automotive culture that exists globally. As such, he wants to build the game he wants and expects all the fans of Gran Turismo games to just get in line and follow suit. How can we appreciate a game aimed at teaching us GCSE history, simulating games of it, and doing everything in its power to stop us enjoying the various features in the game? Clearly, Kaz wants to make a game revolving around SUVs and cars that don't appeal to actual car enthusiasts. And GT7 is solely aimed at new players who would be interested in embracing car history, enjoying car collection, and understanding how cars work. But here's where the real issue comes in. Kaz fully believes GT7 is the perfect blend for all fans, new and old. While this explains the game's marketing, it doesn't explain why everything is manufactured to disappoint older fans, who, again, still make up a vast portion of the player base. So, if you've played GT7 and a number of older titles that were considered the series' prime, you know that this is blatantly false. Why doesn't Kaz's view of the GT series up to now align with those of the fans then? Well, after having done my research for this video, I can't help but agree with and echo a point made by Rufflewaffle, the professional GT7 critic, as he calls himself. Chances are, Kaz fully believes he is telling the truth. But as he's the producer not only of GT7 but also of those older games, meaning he was there for the design and development of them, how does he not understand the core appeal? Well, In another interview around GT7's launch, Kaz stated, "Our developers know all the Gran Turismo games and have played them. I prefer to look to the future myself." Could that imply he never played the games he himself produced to understand why people played those games or go back to play them today? If you were making a video game that harks back to the legacies of Gran Turismo from games 1 to 6 but weren't sure why fans, or even all your employer's subordinates who you see regularly and know on a personal level, enjoyed those games, surely you'd go back through those games to try and comprehend this for yourself, instead of pretending to know why we love those games and trying to deliver what is essentially your own interpretation based on unbacked knowledge or possibly even personalised theories. You can't just fill the glass half empty and expect no one to notice. We won't be happy and we will speak out. Even look back to before my research as well. There are two hilarious clips from Waffle Waffle that have been stuck in my head ever since I began watching his content in 2023.
On my second playthrough to record footage, when it asked me if I'd ever travelled the world of Gran Turismo before, I said no. Partly because I was interested what it had to say, and partly because if I chose yes, I was concerned that Polyphony would send someone to my house to personally spit in my face.
グランツーリスモ7ってね、やっぱり総合的なタイトルなんですね。で、いろんな遊び方が考えられる。速く走る、車を集める、リバリエーターでリバリーをデザインする、あるいは写真を撮る、いろんな遊び方ができます。で、それら全てがカーライフなんです。
It says enough when people continue to return to GT7's predecessors today to try fun challenges made possible by AI that are fun to race, features that enhance the player's experience, and more liberal progression capabilities. Due to being pointlessly restrictive, these just wouldn't be possible in GT7. Aside from the try not to fall asleep and or die of boredom challenge, to be fair though, that one is pretty difficult. What's blown up recently too are enhanced mods of these games which can even make the near perfect games better, such as the GT6 Strato mod and GT4 Spec 2. GT7 has disappointed us to the point where we need to return to or modernise the past to find our fun, because clearly Kaz has no idea why we still like them to this day. Not only does he build the game he wants and not what the fans want, without realising the detriment to Polyphony's reputation, but he pretends he can create a game the fans enjoy and fails miserably. So what's the ideal consequence? Where does Polyphony go from here? Well, in my opinion, there are three options. Option 1 is for Polyphony to continue going down this downhill spiral of ruined Gran Turismo games which has been in progress since Gran Turismo 5, lose more dignity, ruin their reputation further, and be led by Kaz to a future of turmoil. Honestly, if Kaz really thinks he can make a great game which calls back to older games in the series by frequently interrupting the player's experience, forcing the player to do an action which has absolutely no impact on anything at all, or to remind them it's very late and they've got school in the morning, then I genuinely hope Gran Turismo 8 and 9 hit record lows in sales. GT7 definitely served as my reminder to never pre-order a game and wait to buy it until you see the reviews. Option 2 is for Polyphony to break away from the Gran Turismo series and start a brand new series of car games which further represent Kaz's vision of car culture and his idea of a perfect game, whether that features racing in whatever capacity or not. This would be sad news for us fans who have followed the GT series for such a long time, but to be honest, would you rather have that or spend all of the upcoming GT games being insulted by a producer who has never played a game he produced and has no clue as to why we actually enjoy the best GT games? At least breaking away to begin a new franchise would be an open admission that Kaz and Polyphony pretended to get us this whole time and never understood the appeal of their own games. It would also be a clear indication for us long-time GT fans that Polyphony's games would no longer be targeted at us, so we wouldn't be inclined to buy a game we know we'd be disappointed by and weren't interested in. But this breakaway option comes with two big disadvantages, one on Polyphony's side and one on our side. For Polyphony, starting a whole new franchise of car games is a huge risk. Whatever the game they build, who knows how many sales they'll accumulate? Would it appeal to their target market? Would they make any profit from it, or at least break even? The cause of this risk is no longer using the Gran Turismo name. It's so recognisable that slapping it on any racing game they make would attract interest. However, starting a new series in order to satisfy customers in a new niche, or at least make an effort to stop insulting Gran Turismo fans, throws all those foundations out the window. On the side of us Gran Turismo fans, it leaves us with few real options left on the market to turn to when it comes to the console niche of racing an attractive range of typical cars, sports cars, supercars and race cars on our favourite tracks without getting any SUVs, vans or trucks. Remember at the start of this video I alluded to the PS2 era being the prime of not just Gran Turismo but all car racing games? The rise of various car racing video games in the noughties was stark. However, the global financial crisis killed off a bunch of these series and also entire dev teams, leaving us with only the richest and most popular firms. The death of game developers wasn't just an issue back then, as even today we might be losing Gran Turismo's biggest rival, Forza Motorsport, just because Microsoft wants a bit more cash. So, option 2, not ideal. That leaves us with option 3, which is my personal recommendation to Polyphony. And again, given this video's title and thumbnail, you already know what it is. It's time for Kazunori Yamauchi to go. Polyphony urgently needs someone who can steer the company in the right direction. Someone who can get fans on board when it comes to representing their interests, real car culture, and the standards set by older games. Someone who can truly revive the Gran Turismo experience. In the Gran Turismo community, we often joke about how literally any Gran Turismo player could replace Kaz and do a better job than him. And I'm going to try and add some context to this to give this argument some reason. Anyone could have had the idea to create a game where all car brands are drafted into a sandbox where you can race their cars. But in order to make that a reality, you would have had to be a person in the right position, with the right resources at hand and the right people working with you. Kaz just seemed to be the first person who was a leading employee in a video game company to have the idea, and to be in a position and have the resources to pull it off. Kaz isn't a dev, he isn't a game designer, he isn't a game engine programmer, although that's not to instantly assume he has no experience in those fields. He's a CEO. If you watching this have a strong passion for Gran Turismo, have good enough knowledge of what Gran Turismo games stand for, and know how to run and manage a business efficiently, then you yourself can succeed as Polyphony's CEO. Given that Gran Turismo is the only series Polyphony has worked on since 2006, it really is that simple. Kaz has a strong passion for Gran Turismo, obviously because he's the series' founder. He knows how to manage a business efficiently, otherwise he wouldn't be a CEO in the first place. What Kaz has lacked severely though is a knowledge of what Gran Turismo games stood for, and this is the primary cause of Gran Turismo's recent disappointing tenure. Kaz certainly doesn't seem to be stepping down anytime soon, and after 14 years of increasingly under-delivering, or 15 again if you ignore the months, it's time for Polyphony to take action and pull the plug on Kaz. Why not draft in one of the higher-ups that just got fired from Turn 10 Studios? They didn't seem to be adding SUVs every update. Working on the Forza game doesn't mean the employees know Forza and Forza only. If they have a passion for a wide range of sim racing titles, including Gran Turismo, they themselves could come in and turn Gran Turismo around. As long as they don't keep any car models in the game for 20 years, please. I've had a bad enough experience with standard cars already. Is this a bit too radical? Probably. But is ditching the world's most famous racing series in favour of starting a completely new one not as radical then? We've seen harsh firings of formerly successful figures across the automotive world, most recently in the motorsport of Formula 1, where Christian Horner, the man who led Red Bull Racing to 8 Drivers' Championships and 6 Constructors' Championships, was sacked after the risks of slipping into the midfield and Max Verstappen leaving the team became too great. Kaz departing Polyphony is the only option that makes sense. Either he goes or Polyphony makes him go, before the reputation and legacy of Kaz and Polyphony are tarnished forever. Before Gran Turismo becomes the biggest shadow yet of what it once was. Before we never get a true Gran Turismo game ever again.